All right, well, thank you so much for everybody coming to see this presentation. This is the 10th year anniversary of Night Dive Studios. And I'm assuming you're familiar with what we do, but just in case you aren't, our goal is to go out and find lost classic video games that have either been lost to time or legal issues or publishers going bankrupt, that type of thing, and we bring them back for people to enjoy again. It's kind of our philosophy that video games are a very important part of our culture, and it's an art form. And to just be regarded that way, we have to respect the past. And it's it's thanks to expos like this, like the Retro Game Expo, that brings us all together to appreciate them. So I prepared a quick little video that just kind of goes over some of the highlights of what we've done these past 10 years. No, I'm just going to click through not paying for PowerPoint. Okay. So, Night Dive specializes in tracking down lost classics to be enjoyed once more. Again, we've been around for about 10 years now, and initially, we started out with just a few titles, System Shock 2 being our first, and then that was followed up by I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And from then on, it was a number of games that we did just using DOSBox and ScumVM and emulation tools just to provide the game itself in its original form to people who wanted to play it again. And then from there, we developed our own engine that allowed the games to be ported to new platforms for even more people to enjoy, with some nice additional features like widescreen support, additional rendering options, and putting in more cut content that was left on the cutting room floor by the original developers. And kind of all this started back when I was a kid. And my dad bought our first PC back in 1995, and that more or less kind of opened the doors to me. And I was a subscriber of PC Gamer, and right around the time I was supposed to be applying to colleges, there was an issue that came out with an ad for a local, well, it's local to here, San Francisco art school that was offering a degree in game art and design. And I applied and it was accepted, and I wrote to PC Gamer thanking them for more or less giving me that opportunity, because otherwise I may not have known about it. And they printed my letter in the magazine, and I wrote, I'd like to thank you not just for delivering a quality magazine each month, but more importantly for giving me a bright and prosperous future. Last June, while I was applying to colleges, I read an article about an art school that offered computer game art and design as a major. I entered the contest for the full scholarship, but unfortunately I didn't win. My mother saw how much effort I put into the contest and thus made it her goal to send me to school to learn something I was truly passionate about. I left my home in Massachusetts and arrived in San Francisco that October, and I've been here ever since. I'll be graduating in summer 2007, at which point I hope to find myself working at a startup company or for a company like Flagship Studios. But wherever I land, this won't be the last time you hear from Steve Kick. I've made it my personal responsibility to create a computer game that will change the industry forever. So once again, I'd like to thank you, PC Gamer, and of course my parents, because if I didn't read your magazine, I wouldn't be here in San Francisco pursuing my dreams today. So I went to school. And I've just supplied a couple of pictures that I took while I was there. San Francisco was a beautiful place, a lot of culture. It was a great school. But I will say, and if anybody here has any interest in getting into the industry, I'd be very happy to give you advice on kind of a best path. There's a lot of tools and resources that are available today that we didn't even have in 2007. Stuff like YouTube and the amount of tutorials that are available for everybody to learn just about every facet of game design and game development that you can. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend you spend the kind of money it costs to go to a school like this, but this is just how I got in. When I was in school, I met my wife, and the first thing that attracted me to her was her character modeling skills. She was arguably the best artist at the school, and I knew that if I wanted to improve and get better, I kind of had to date her. Yes, thank you. And we had kind of a friendly cooperation thing going on where we didn't get in each other's way. And our main goal was to get a job in the industry as character artists. And we more or less decided that if either one of us kind of became a distraction to that, we would end the relationship. Thankfully, we're still together. And we both got jobs in the industry around the same time. So she graduated just before I did and got a job at Sony Online Entertainment, who was developing a free-to-play MMO called Free Realms. And it was a really great experience, and we worked on that project for a couple years before transitioning over to Clone Wars. And at that point, my wife had kind of gotten burned out from the daily grind, the 9 to 5, going to work for a corporate entity. And so she quit, and I continued to work on PlanetSide 2. And PlanetSide 2 had just a more complicated art style. We went from low poly, hand-painted diffuse textures to high-res ZBrush models with specular and normal maps and that type of thing, the type of thing I was really interested in. But even then, it had kind of worn on me as well, and I also decided to quit Sony. And so what we decided to do is we saved up a good amount of money from our job, and we loaded up everything that we owned into our Honda Civic, and we drove across the border into Tijuana. We disappeared for about 11 months, and during that time we went to many beautiful places and met really wonderful people and had incredible just adventures, and it kind of re-inspired me and reinvigorated my love for art, for what it was that allowed us to do this. And more importantly, we had brought a little laptop computer with us that I had put some of my favorite games on, Fallout 2, Grim Fandango, Full Throttle, Curse of Monkey Island, and System Shock 2. System Shock 2 had always been one of my favorite games and was probably one of the driving factors which made me want to be a part of the industry to begin with. And one night we were in Guatemala. This is pictures of the hostel that we stayed at. It was deep in the jungle. There was this wonderful tropical storm, and I thought to myself, now's the perfect time to play System Shock 2. I loaded up the game, and I couldn't get it to run. So I went to GOG.com, and I just assumed that it would be on there. System Shock 2 is one of the most, it's one of the best games ever made. And I thought if anybody would have it, it'd be GOG. But unfortunately, it wasn't there. It just happened to be their #1 requested game of all time with something around 40,000 votes. And I didn't have anything else to do, so I decided to do some internet sleuthing and try to figure out who owned the rights to the game and why a game as important to the industry as Shock 2 wasn't available anymore. And my search led me to an article on G4 TV, which didn't exist then, but there was an article about how when Looking Glass Entertainment went out of business, their rights were split between an insurance company in the Midwest and Electronic Arts, who owned the trademark. And just out of curiosity, I reached out to their general counsel and said, hey, do you guys own the rights to this? What are you doing with it? I wasn't expecting much, but the next day they wrote back to me and asked me if I wanted to make System Shock 3. I wasn't expecting that, but you know, I was in the middle of the jungle at the time and had probably about $5,000 to my name, so that wasn't really an option. But I suggested to them, well, why don't we re-release the first 2 games? They hadn't really considered it at that time, but unbeknownst to me, Electronic Arts had just let the trademark rights lapse. And so Star Insurance Company acquired the trademark and paired it with the copyright and everything else that they had, and then licensed the rights to me to re-release the original games. I'll tell you now, I had absolutely zero experience in the business side of things. Every time I had a phone call with their general counsel, I basically wrote myself a choose your own adventure type chart of things that I thought they would say, and then my response to that. And that helped out a lot. I just remember trembling on these calls, which are second nature now, of course, but back then it was terrifying. And the amount that they asked for the license was also terrifying. So when we got home, we lived at my wife's parents' house. Hi, Marty and Dave. Thank you again. And I basically asked them for money. I said, hey, I've got this really great opportunity. I honestly don't know what's going to happen, but I believe in this. And they didn't even hesitate. They gave me the money that I needed, and I wrote the largest check I'd ever seen in my life, and I sent it away. And then I wrote to GOG, and I said, hey, I've got the rights to System Shock 2. And they wrote back and said, we don't believe you. So actually on the email chain, it was a forwarded email from their head of biz dev at the time, but it actually said, yeah, we think he's full of shit, but you should check this out. So I sent them a copy of the contract that I have with Star, and on Valentine's Day 2013, System Shock 2 was released on GOG, and Night Dive was born. It did really, really well. It did so well that it basically allowed me to start a studio that could focus entirely on finding other classic games and re-releasing them again for people to enjoy again. And again, it was a really terrifying experience, and I went to my friends and family for advice. I didn't even know what a CPA was before this. It's a certified personal accountant, in case you don't know. Somebody that could help me, manage the funds that were coming in and find creative ways to spend money to make more money. I was basically thrown into the fire of becoming a business owner overnight, and it was a really fun time. Pretty stressful, but also really fun. A little background on how we chose Night Dive. We had been given the license from Star Insurance Company, and there was a place to put a legal entity, which we didn't have at the time, and I didn't really know much about. And I distinctly remember my wife and I, we took a walk around the neighborhood just trying to come up with ideas for what to call this thing that we had just kind of created. And we have a shared love of a hobby of diving. And there was one night in particular where we were in Australia, in the Great Barrier Reef, where we did a night dive. And it was the most exhilarating and also terrifying thing that we had ever done. And I just remember being in the depths in complete darkness with just the single torch, and it was like anything could be around any rock or crevice. And I kind of equated that to what we do at Night Dive, which is we go into this inky blackness and we look for treasure. And that's kind of what inspired the name and our logo. Building the team was also just an incredibly exciting thing because I didn't know many people in the industry outside of kind of the art and animation scene. When you're in a big company, you tend to get segregated into your disciplines, so all the artists hang out and all the animators are kind of cool, and then the programmers have their own little clique. And I knew that I needed people from all the various disciplines. I needed business development, I needed people who could manage communities, I needed engineers. And after System Shock 2 came out, I was on the Steam forums just looking at the various user guides that people were creating to help others with mods. And I found this one by Daniel Gratian where he created a very comprehensive, very professional looking modding guide. And I reached out to him, said, hey, I really love what you're doing. Would you mind doing something like this for our webpage so that there's just an alternate resource for people who like the game? And I contracted him, and he's been with us ever since. He's the oldest employee we've had, and he's now the co-director on the System Shock remake that we're making. So he went from basically having no experience in a game dev situation to being one of the leads on a highly anticipated project. Larry Cooperman, who is kind of my right-hand man, is our head of biz dev, and he just reached out to me on LinkedIn. He liked what we did, and he was just leaving a job at GameStop. He was basically the guy who started the Impulse platform, which was the Steam competitor at the time, if you remember that. Well, apparently GameStop didn't think digital was the future, so they cut his whole program and laid him off, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. But Larry basically is the guy who knows somebody. So I met him at GDC after I had already hired him, and he said, who do you want to meet? I said, well, Activision has some games I want to get. He made a phone call, and in 5 minutes we were meeting with the head of biz dev at Activision. So it was, again, I kind of just sat back and just let him do the work and took some notes. But that was kind of our second pillar towards building this team that's lasted us long. The last pillar is this guy named Sam Villarreal, who I discovered on his own website. He'd been creating a source port of the original Turok Dinosaur Hunter based off the N64. And I reached out to him and found out that he had been working at Timegate. Their project had just kind of gone south and he was looking for work. So I brought him on as we had just secured the license from DreamWorks for Turok Dinosaur Hunter. And that was kind of our first foray into building a custom engine that was going to allow us to do things that were a little more complex and a little more exciting than some of the DOSBox and ScumVM work we've been doing. So just to go briefly back on that, these are a whole bunch of games that we were able to acquire early on that we could get out on just Steam and GOG using free emulation tools. I also will say that I kind of miss these days because I could kind of go out and get whatever I wanted, regardless of how well it would do commercially. And so that's why you see things like Harvester, Bad Mogo, Time Lapse, and some of these other adventure games that literally no one's heard of. They were games that I played with my dad growing up, and so they just always had a special place in my heart, and I'm just glad that we were able to do something with them early on. But so when Sam joined the team, that really opened the door to a lot of these other games that we could really, I hate to use the word exploit, but we could exploit them further and allow more people to play them on more platforms than just PC. Noctropolis was probably one of our first games. It's an adventure game that has this really cool comic book style. Then Turok, Forsaken, Turok 2, Strife Veteran Edition. It just really enabled us to kind of flex our muscle and to start adding more value to these games. Just as an example, with Turok, the first level could be a little confusing, and some of the keys are hidden in places that are just obnoxious. And so Sam was able to build a level editor with the source code that we had and actually change the layout of that first area so that it wouldn't be so annoying for the player. We were also able to change a lot of the jumping puzzles so that there was just a little more room for error. If anyone's played the original, it's painful. And this really helped streamline the experience and just made it something that was really special. There's also another really kind of fun story about Turok. We were working on the game, and it had originally been reverse engineered from the original N64, which is a lot of work, very time intensive, and you're also running into issues where the accuracy of the game is in flux. The developers add in a lot of little interesting tidbits in the code that give the game its unique behavior. And those things are often hard to replicate if you don't have the original code to reference. But once we announced that we were doing the game, one of the original developers reached out to us and just flat out asked us if we would like the source code. And that's really rare. So we said, yeah, sure. Would you also like the source code to Turok 2? Okay. So he gave that to us, and that enabled us to go right from Turok 1 to Turok 2. And might paint a picture as to why we haven't done Turok 3 yet, is we can't find the code. But we're working on that. Strife was another one where we were able to get the source code, Forsaken as well, and Noctropolis, though Noctropolis had to be converted from assembly to C. So we had to hire one of Sam's friends to do that. And to kind of segue back to our team and how it was built, after those first 3 were hired, it's basically been, well, I've got a friend that can do this, and hey, I know a guy who can do that, and slowly the team has just grown and grown and grown, from all people who kind of more or less know each other, and it's created a really, just a really tight-knit team. So here's just a little more information on Kex. After, I believe, Turok 2, we kind of formally branded the engine. And for those who don't know, Kex actually stands for Kaiser's EX engine. And Kaiser is Sam Villarreal's handle. It's just what he wanted to call it. I wanted to do something cooler like the Nautilus engine. But since he created it, I kind of gave him the naming rights. But what it's evolved into is basically a high-level wrapper that can take any game where you've got some code and provide our engineers the ability to inject different rendering engines so that it'll run on PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. For a while, they all used different ones, so I believe, I might be wrong here, but I think Xbox used Direct3D and PlayStation used OpenGL for a long time. And your game would have to support all those rendering languages in order to run natively on those platforms. But this has enabled us to create remasters and source ports of games that otherwise would not have been playable. So this was kind of our big break that really put us on the map with a lot of fans. We got contacted by id after, I think, Turok 2 came out, as they had seen Sam's work on a reverse engineering project of Doom 64. And I asked him not to do that. But even when he's not working, he's working. He's just one of those guys. So there'll be times where, there's a deadline and the game's going to get done and it'll ship, and Sam will go to me, hey, can you go get the rights to this? Because I'm like already almost done with it already. So I don't really get to choose what we work on anymore. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting titles coming out relatively soon, thanks to Sam. But id had reached out to us and contracted us to do Doom 64. And it was turning into such a great project that instead of a standalone release, they decided to bundle it with Doom Eternal. And it ended up kind of changing a lot of the ways we thought about like big releases and how retro games kind of play into that. And now that's why you see a lot of companies, when they do a big AAA release, they'll include the original game with it that's been tuned by a studio like ours. So after Doom 64, they asked us to do Quake, and it wasn't really much of a discussion. They just said Quake, and we were like, all right, let's do it. And that also ended up just being an incredible boon for Night Dive and the work that we do, and the quality as well. They actually allowed us to go in and change a lot of the original art assets so that they just were a little bit smoother. Like the UVs were pushed just a little bit more, there was less stretching. And all that artwork had to go through Kevin Cloud, who was the original artist on this project. And so that was just a really fun opportunity to work with the original developers to ensure that their vision remained true to what we were doing. And that's been kind of a consistent thing that we've done our best to do. But I will tell you, it is very surreal to see your name in the credits of a game you played when you were 12. So the next couple of games that we worked on included Blade Runner Enhanced Edition, Power Slave Exhumed, and Shadow Man Remastered. And each of these kind of had their own challenges. But I will say we've really been able to continuously push what we want to do with each game. So with Power Slave Exhumed, for those who don't know, the original Power Slave was released on 3 platforms. There was a PC version using the Build engine. There was a Sega Saturn version that used its own proprietary engine called the Slave Driver engine, and a PlayStation version. And each of these versions was completely different. The Build engine was more or less just a standalone, very linear first-person shooter. And then the Saturn versions and the PlayStation versions had some similarities, but they were more like a Metroidvania. So you have open-ended exploration. You have to revisit previous areas with power-ups you acquire on different levels. And it's more or less the fan favorite. But we realized that we'd kind of have to combine all of them into a singular package to try to please everybody. And the name actually comes from the US release being called Power Slave and the European version being called Exhumed. So this game was just all over the place. And we kind of put them together into one title that was just really fun to work on. Shadow Man was another one where we had some of the original developers come on and help us flesh out versions of the game that didn't make it to the final version. So in the code, we discovered that there was multiple levels and bosses that weren't implemented due to time constraints and budget constraints back in the 90s. And so they actually finished writing the design documents for us, and our developers finished the game the way that they had originally envisioned. And that's really what we're trying and aiming to do with everything that we work on from here on out, because it just adds that extra level of polish and care that both honors the original but brings something new to the table for people to experience. So right now we're working on System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition, as well as recently announced Rise of the Triad Ludicrous Edition, which we're doing in tandem with Apogee and New Blood, if you guys are familiar with them. So, oops. Let's talk about System Shock a little bit. And after this, we could do like a quick Q&A if that's cool. And then we could do a quick little trivia contest. I brought some of our games to give away. So, System Shock, the remake, was kickstarted in 2016. And at that point, we had brought on some Unity developers to create a prototype. For those who are interested, the Unity developers actually caught my eye because they were doing a fan-made Dark Forces remaster. But more on that later. The Kickstarter was a tremendous success. But unfortunately, we ran into just some staffing issues, some creative differences, and more or less the original art team that we had brought on to do the prototype was poached by another company. And it left us in this really weird position where the people who had more or less established the entire art direction and design direction were gone, and the people who had given us the money for Kickstarter were expecting that. And so when the game started to really kind of veer off in a direction that raised some eyebrows, that's when we kind of decided to pull it back, and that was the hiatus in 2018. After that, we went back to our roots in terms of the original prototype we created, and we released an adventure alpha that was more or less what people were hoping for. And we've been working on it ever since, and we are incredibly close to launch here. So are there any backers here of this project? Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. It is greatly appreciated. It's been really rough, but I hope that it's worth the wait. That's all we want to do, is just deliver something that is going to hopefully blow your mind. So thank you. I've included some before and after screenshots of the original and what we're doing here. just so you can see how close we're trying to capture the original, but have it look and feel brand new at the same time. So the bright colors is something that we've really tried to replicate. We know we're creating this truly horrific experience, but why can't it be colorful? So this is one of my favorite things is, in the original, you've just got these black windows with these stars, which is very terrifying as is, but you're supposed to be orbiting Saturn. So we threw a planet in there. Here's the radioactive trench. And yeah, finally, I just kind of wanted to just touch on preservation and kind of how it relates to the film industry. Le Voyage dans la Lune was a movie or short film that was created in 1902 by Georges Méliès, and it was incredibly popular as no one had really created a movie before. Everything that was captured on film during that time was kind of random. There weren't filmmakers. People weren't doing things that were telling stories. There was no narrative or characters. And this was a massive sensation. Fortunately, and kind of unfortunately at the same time, the film was pirated and basically sent all over Europe for people to enjoy because it was so revolutionary at the time. And World War I had kind of thrown France into chaos, and at one point, the French military occupied Méliès' studio, and they had no regard for any of the things that were in there. They melted down the celluloid, and they stripped it of the silver that was in the film stock, and then they turned the celluloid itself into boot heels for soldiers' shoes. And then everything else was just more or less destroyed, and it left his entire operation just decimated. The film wasn't even rediscovered until 1929, which was 27 years later, at which point there was a rediscovery of cinema and specifically of the work that Méliès had done. And then it wouldn't be another 110 years until the film was released on a physical medium, like Blu-ray and DVD. I believe it just skipped the VHS and Betamax, but it had been a long time. And for something that was this influential, it's hard to believe almost. But this film inspired many more to come after it and really kind of led us to where we are today. You could even look at things like Star Wars and draw comparisons and influences. And I feel like we're kind of in a similar situation with games where there are so many that were released that many people may not have even heard of and that have been completely lost to time for one reason or another. And just recently, I would say probably in the last 10 years, there's been a real effort to go out and preserve a lot of what's been lost. A lot of that effort is being done by the Video Game History Foundation. So if you guys have seen Frank Cifaldi, he's here. Mike Mika at Digital Eclipse, they're doing a really wonderful job of that as well. Video games are art, and we got to do a better job of preserving them for future generations to enjoy. And not only that, but to be influenced and inspired by. Because if we want more great games, we got to play the stuff that came before it. So, thank you very much. So, let's do a quick little trivia contest real quick. We'll test, see if you've been listening. And then we can do some Q&A if that's all right. All right, so who was the original developer of System Shock 1?
Origin Systems?
Yes, awesome. You can come and get this if you like. Okay. I hope you don't have every single answer.
I'll let other folks have a chance.
Okay. Yeah, and feel free to use your phone. First one to Google it, I guess. Who provided the voice of Shodan? Yes. That's right. Yes, thank you. Okay, this one might be a little more difficult. What door code was popularized by System Shock that makes an appearance in other immersive sims? Yes. What developer of the original System Shock went on to direct Deus Ex for Ion Storm? Back there. Yeah. Okay, this one's easy. Who was the original developer of System Shock 2? Yes.
That would be Irrational?
Nope.
Oh,
Yes. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Okay, now we can do a Q&A.
Since I'm already up.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your partnership with LRG, by the way. I love your partnership there.
Oh, thanks.
Any chance of you doing a cheaper version of Blood with them? The last edition was like $150. A little outside my price range, and I was hoping for a cheaper version.
Yeah, like a just a PC big box or.
Yeah, or something like in the $78 range or something.
Yeah, I would like to do that. We had this idea of creating these little like mini big box games that would have like an enamel pin as well as like a code for the game in it, so it wouldn't take up like that much space. If you collect games, which I'm assuming everybody does here, they take up a lot of room and they collect a lot of dust. So we were hoping to like make them a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to do that.
Cool. Yeah. Please keep up that partnership. I love it. Thank you.
So I've been a big fan of your Turok remasters. Really appreciate Turok too when you try to include all the maps from the PC and the N64 version. I'm glad you mentioned like Turok 3 that you're looking into that. Have you like explored other opportunities like Nintendo Switch Online, like throwing an emulated version of the original one or something like that ever?
That's a really good question. We have had some discussions with Nintendo. I know that there would be definitely a lot of nostalgia attached to just playing the original. But that's something that we should definitely explore. At least if they ever do like an N64 mini, I would love to have it on there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen, I just want to say, I can't convey in words how much emotion I felt when System Shock 2 came out on GOG. I'd literally been waiting for an official way to actually get a hold of the game that wasn't a used copy on eBay since probably 2005, 2006. So that was a huge moment for me as well. So thank you for putting in that work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to bring up to the fact that you mentioned Deus Ex. Is there any chance you're going to be bringing or enhancing any ports of either Deus Ex, Daikatana, or any other ideas? I had to bring up Daikatana, you know I had to.
Yeah. Yeah, funny you should mention that. I don't know how much I can say. My publisher is actually in the room.
I retract my statement then. Thank you.
Thanks.
I wanted to know if your studio is ever looking to remaster Hexen or any of the Hexen series games in the future.
Yeah, it's totally up to Microsoft now, as they have acquired Activision, which owned Raven, which uses the Doom engine for their games. So yeah, it's come up a lot actually. There's a lot of people that are kind of upset about the game industry just becoming more and more condensed. Microsoft owns so much. EA owns so much. There's a lot of IP that's just kind of all over the place. But on our side of things, it makes things like that a lot easier because the engine and all that is obviously owned by Bethesda, which is Microsoft. And before the acquisition, Activision had their own rights to those games, but now they're together. So yeah, Hexen and Heretic are definitely things that are on our, I wouldn't say to-do list, but will probably be on our to-do list pretty soon.
I'm sure it's a large one.
Yeah, I don't think the merger has gone through completely yet. They still have to go through a lot of the various filings and everything, but I know a lot of people are excited to see those again.
Well, thank you, and thank you for everything you guys have done. It's awesome.
Thanks, Ian. Really appreciate it.
First, congrats on the Quake re-release. That's probably like one of the greatest remakes of all time. It's incredible. Question, I know you got this, but Quake 2? What about Quake 3? Maybe?
Pretty sure I just, oh yeah. This?
Yeah. Yeah. Small one.
This is totally unrelated.
Nice. That'd be awesome. Also, Mike or Joel, best host? Curious.
Which one?
Mike or Joel, best host?
Oh. Mike,
Yeah.
by far.
Yeah, you're wrong, but good job on Quake.
I will say, you're gonna really like this, but I got the riff tracks guys to do a whole voice recording for System Shock Remake.
Holy shit.
All right, hey, thank you everybody. It's been wonderful.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are the playlist of the Portland Retro 2022 and some other interesting videos. Thank you.